Mukotoni wokayapya, ionalelo. Mukotoni wokayapya, iwokayapya, uwaona kulabanda. Owe yelelo, ionalelo. Owe yelelo, iwokayapya, uwaona ulabanda. Owe yelelo. Ionalelo, owe yelelo, iwokayapya, uwahona ulabana owe yelelo, ionalelo, owe yelelo, iwokayapya, uwahona ulabana owe Chambeshina bosa. Chambeshina bosa. Chambeshina bosa. Our viewers, wherever you're watching us all over the world, welcome to this special edition of the Bakwetu TV. Today, we've got a special guest with us, and we'll be talking about transforming the agriculture sector. What will it take? And today, I've got Mr. Bimbe as my co-host, and I will be introducing our guest in a few minutes' time. But for now, I'll introduce Mr. Bimbe. Mr. Bimbe, welcome to Bakwetu TV.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chilufya. I'm happy to be here. And yeah, looking forward to the discussion with our expert and guests tonight.
Yeah. Okay. And Christian, welcome. Though I'm gonna allow you to introduce yourself later. Welcome to this special edition of Bakwetu TV.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chilufya. I'm happy to be here. Good evening, listeners and viewers.
Thank you, Christian. Dr. Christian. Today, as I said, we're talking about transforming the agriculture sector. What will it take? That's the question we'll be discussing today. But just a synopsis or summary of what we're going to talk about today. Zambia is heavily endowed with soils and climatic conditions that position in well to become a major global agriculture player. Political parties, political party manifestos, and successful governments, we're talking of from 1964 to date, have recognized this and expressed intentions to shift the economy away from the non renewable mining to agriculture that adopts sustainable practices. However, it has it has been very difficult to observe any significant progress. Where are we getting it wrong? Where should we be starting from? And our guest tonight is Dr. Christian Chileshe, who is a development practitioner with particular focus on entrepreneurship and agribusiness. He has spent much of his 30 years career promoting inclusive and sustainable market systems that work for Africa. Agriculture continues to lend itself as a means to include the poor and lift many out of poverty. Christian joins us in a series of discussions that provides clear action points for the information of Zambia's agriculture and indeed for the rest of Africa. This is the first in the series. The first in this series will focus on some of the key historical aspects that may have contributed to us ending up where we are now. It is important to understand the past and pick up valuable lessons that will help us ensure mistakes are not continually repeated. In each discussion in this series, we'll end up with a call to action, specific action points that can be considered by the public, the private, and the development sector. Dr. Christian Chileshe, welcome once again to Bakwetu TV. Can you just briefly tell the viewers who you are? Just a brief bio about yourself before we start the question discussing this important topic. Welcome once again, Christian.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you tonight. As mentioned, my name is Christian Chileshe. I have a background in development work. I spent a lot of time in market systems development. That's what I'm still doing even right now. Worked in many parts of rural Zambia and also participated in major initiatives that seek to see how agriculture can work for development. I'm currently in Sierra Leone, where I've been doing consulting assignments. I've spent a lot of time in consulting work across different parts of Africa. Right now, I'm in Sierra Leone, where I'm, amongst other things, seeing how we can help stabilize and develop the agriculture sector in a country that has had major challenges in the past, as most of us may be aware. Sure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Christian Chileshe. Over to you, Mr. Nason Bimbe.
Thank you very much, Christian. That is a very rich CV, and you seem to have traversed the continent of Africa, helping these African countries upgrade themselves into a sustainable agriculture policies. My first question really is, political party manifestos and successive governments, say we are looking at from 1964 to date, have recognized this and expressed intentions really to shift the economy away from non-renewable mining to agriculture that adopts sustainable practices. I mean, we've been grappling with this idea of, understanding mining as a diminishing asset and diversifying our economy. Why has it taken us so long to diversify our economy?
Okay.
Over to you.
Okay, thank you. I think that's been rightly pointed out in the introduction. It's important for us to understand the historical context so that we know what some of the issues are. Pick up some issues from there and see how you move with them going forward. As they say, context is everything. If you don't understand the context, then you can provide a solution for the wrong context. So in the end, it doesn't help. So when you think about agriculture, we have a history, quite a rich history. If you recall or look back from the various writings, we have the period from just after independence to maybe somewhere around 1975, almost a decade of serious investment in the agriculture sector because of the ideological position then and the beliefs of the leaders at the time. So by the mid 70s, we had invested quite a lot into human capital, for instance. And by the time we got into the 80s, we had different experts, right from very senior levels. I've met some of them, former permanent secretary in the Ministry of Agriculture, very experienced person, and who's, in fact, in this particular case, I think who served for many, many years. I think he could have done even 14 years, this gentleman I once met. So very experienced gentleman, well-trained, all the way to camp level. We had a very well-organized agriculture system, all the way to the camp level. Extension systems were very well developed and very deliberate about what they're trying to achieve, okay? So that's something that we must recognize because this is a system that worked for the purpose for which it was designed. Of course, there were major issues with regard to the ideology within which it was being, implemented. It was a socialist kind of paradigm, which clearly we all know was never going to really lead to sustainable development. But that does not take away the fact that there was a very well organized agriculture system that was working for that particular type of ideology. So there was a lot of production happening. The supply chain was thought through very well. You had input supply that was clearly defined. You had mechanisms for accessing loans, for instance. You had good agronomic and livestock practice support. I mean, you had education institutions from a university all the way to a farmer training institute. Okay, now these are about 4 or 5 levels of training institutions that existed, okay, to provide support to agriculture. And then you had an off-taker, institutions that would buy off the produce, and market it. Okay, so the system was very clear, obviously not sustainable, but very clearly designed. There's something we need to pick up from that. The fact that there was political will, okay, and the system received a lot of investment, well thought through in terms of making sure it works for the purpose for which it was designed, okay, a socialist kind of context. So political will is an important aspect. The fact that the system was very well organized is something we must recognize, okay? Then we moved from that era to another where we realized there were some important missing elements. For instance, there was no push towards commercialization and growth orientation because of the ideological paradigm, the thinking, the belief system, okay? There was no push towards commercialization, making a lot of money, becoming wealthy, and all the incentives that go with that, okay? So when we moved away from there, we have an era from the early 90s up to the end of the 90s in which we decided to shift away from state or command economy or state-led economy. But that was the beginning of losing out on what was working well about the past. The fact that we could have still shifted to commercialization and private sector led by replacing institutions that worked from the state to private sector and managing the process. We didn't do that, Okay, investment into agriculture systems development went into the back burner, as one might say. And so we moved from there. So the next 10 years saw a situation where there was not as much deliberate effort towards developing agriculture systems. But during that time, a few issues were recognized. For instance, the issue of maize marketing. So you have, I think FRA came in during that time. By the time we began the 2000s, again, there was a difference in administration and the thinking around that. And this is the period, the next 10 years from 2000 is when we have FISIP, for instance, coming in. Now, FISIP was designed to try and incentivize growth orientation, to help small-scale farmers move up to a level where they can become emergent farmers, for instance. Okay, so the initial thinking was very good, but then I think political issues come in. So in the end, it became a social welfare arrangement where fertilizer is being distributed, and we continue to spread out more and more, so that in the end people receive less and less fertilizer per household, and then it's spread out, covering more. There was no mechanism for graduation. It was intended from the beginning that people receiving subsidized inputs should graduate, and then others again are picked up and they graduate. If they choose not to graduate, they're still weaned off, and then others are picked up, so that you have more and more farmers going into the what we call the missing middle, the emergent farmer, the gap between the large-scale farmer and the smallholders. Okay, so that is another era that we can pick out, where some efforts were made, but then not in a very systematic and organized manner, and some commitments were not followed through. We can move beyond that to a period in which there was not as much clarity in terms of agriculture development. We signed many commitments, continent-wide, the comprehensive agriculture development program, for instance. But at the end of the day, we've struggled to domesticate that and make it work for our country. So we are now at a point where there is no question about the recognition of agriculture as a critical component in inclusive development, the kind of development that leaves no one behind. That is very clear. Recently, governments were in Senegal, and they were renewing their commitments to agriculture as the main thrust for the continent and for most countries in Africa. So the recognition is there. But then building the specific mechanisms and following through is what has been missing. Number one, political will. Fortunately for Zambia, we have seen that political will, and we've known what it can do, because we saw that in the period up to the late 80s. Okay, we saw the outcomes of that. The other issue that was missing then that we can introduce now is the issue of commercialization. Shifting mindsets towards a more profit-oriented type of operation, where we are very deliberate about optimizing on the resources that we have. Okay, so that's another issue that needed to be thought about. So at this point, if you like, if you ask me, where have we been getting it wrong? Well, number one, political will. Okay, countries that have had political will, and we'll be probably talking about this later, using them as cases in point. Countries that have had political will have managed to produce results from agriculture. Without that, everything else, falls apart. The other issue is industrialization of agriculture. That is an important component that incentivizes agriculture. If you do not have significant agro-processing or agri-industries that pick up, add value, and then sell or export, because those are the ones that incentivize the farmers, okay, to produce, to become more efficient, and to grow. We do not have a lot of those in the country, and again, we go back to political will, because we need to create an environment in which both large and small players can come into the space and begin to produce. It's not just the large-scale players, because now we have appropriate technologies that allow small-scale agro-processors that can come in and provide a market within a particular area for farmers that are producing. So commercialization is important. Agro-processing, having that component feeding off agriculture production is critical as well. But political will is the overarching kind of component that we need to revisit. Thank you.
That was fantastic, Dr. Christian. I was expecting Mr. Bimbe to pick up that if there's any follow-up question or anything. Over to you, Mr. Bimbe.
Thank you very much, Christian. That was brilliant analysis of what really worked that time, looking at the context and where we are moving. I like the emphasis on political will and commercialization. I think as we discuss further and go into other series, we're going to unpack some of these concepts, what we mean by political will, what we mean by commercialization of agriculture. The idea of FISIP, I personally have been, though, as you have explained, was a good thing. The intention was a good thing. In my mind, I think it really created a big problem for us in Zambia, including the FRA, where we kind of moved it away from the concept of managing food security into what I would call the numbered kind of arrangement, where it became a buyer when it was supposed to be a buyer of last resort, and keeping reserves so that you can, when prices are really low, you release them to stabilize the price. So I'm sure we will cover that. So that was a very good take, Christian. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Yeah, Christian, whilst you're still on the spotlight, first of all, thank you so much for that. The way you've explained, you've answered the question. That's fantastic. But then moving forward, Christian, we haven't done a lot of progress when it comes to commercialization of agriculture, and you've mentioned that a lot of people haven't moved from small farming to emergent farming. But then why have certain countries like Kenya and Ethiopia made significant achievements in transforming the agricultural sector into major distributor to GDP? That's the first part of the question. The second part of the question is there anything we can learn from our neighboring countries, such as Malawi? Over to you, Christian.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very interesting, because we do have countries in Africa that are making major strides. So agriculture development is not as complicated as we sometimes want to make it look. It becomes difficult when there are major competing interests, okay? Especially with the duty bearers themselves. Then it gets very complicated. Let me start with countries like Kenya. We can talk about Ethiopia, for instance, and maybe one or two others that are making major strides. The socio-cultural context is important. One of the things that political and other leaders, not just political leaders, need to do within any particular society is to encourage and to celebrate entrepreneurship. Those who are taking risk and breaking barriers and beginning to grow should be celebrated so that they're encouraged to grow further. And also those that have been left behind are encouraged to jump on and to also move. Okay. Now, it's a cultural reorientation. We have our backgrounds where, for instance, we've done agriculture for centuries, one form of agriculture or another, and it has been subsistence. Okay. It's something that just keeps us busy in the village, and we don't know whether we're making money or not. We just keep busy, and the people in the urban areas keep sending money to the village. Okay, each time there is a new planting season, you have to send money, and they plant and they harvest and they sell their maize, and then the next planting season you have to keep sending. And somehow we have accepted that as a normal way of life. You know, we're not raising major questions to say, hey, wait a minute, how far will this take us? Suppose there's no one from the city to send the money. You know, what happens to us in the village? Okay, and as people see their vulnerability, they're moving away from the village into the city, which is creating another different type of problem in itself. So now, here is where the leadership comes in, to actually encourage entrepreneurship that makes use of land, okay, or livestock, and to support such and to celebrate them. Other cultures do that. Now, for Kenya, for instance, there is the influence of the Arab culture. Okay, they're exposed to that because of their geo location. And there has been a clear demonstration effect in terms of the benefits of entrepreneurship in many spheres, including in agriculture. And so you have a very productive people there that pursue profits, whether they're growing crops or they're doing dairy, for instance. I'll tell you, they started at some point even exporting milk to Zambia, Kenya. Okay, it's a country that's not very big. It's got a huge population, but because they're profit oriented, they're more entrepreneurial. Their level of productivity is so much higher that they can feed their own country and export to other countries. I can pick Egypt as an example, but Ethiopia also is an old civilization. Okay, that has had that orientation in spite of some of the challenges there, but over time. But this is a civilization that rebounds. They will have famine 1 year, after a few years they rebound, and they're a major player even at the continental level. So we are talking about a social cultural environment that is oriented towards being productive and towards generating wealth. For societies that are not naturally oriented towards that, then you need leaders in the different spheres, okay, including the political leaders, but beyond that, to actually popularize entrepreneurship in agriculture. We do not have that happening consistently. And so because of that, when we have gained some ground, we've lost it over time. We've celebrated some Zambian farmers, for instance, who have grown very big. I won't mention names. But over time, what has happened to them? You know, and what could we do differently if we went at it again? Those are lessons we need to learn. We need champions that popularize entrepreneurship in agriculture. Then we'll be like a Kenya, we'll be like in Ethiopia, Egypt, which has very limited land. Much of it is a desert except for the area around the Nile River. But they export fruit juices, you know, and it's a huge population. Look at a few other countries nearby. Let's come to Malawi. Malawi is an example of political will during the time of one leader who transformed agriculture. Gentlemen, this is a leader who actually became president and insisted he would be minister of agriculture. He says, I want to change agriculture in this country, so I will be the minister of agriculture. And there is a book written about him by Callistus Juma, Professor Callistus Juma, who captured that and documented it and said, look, we can learn something from Malawi. Of course, Malawi has since slid back, lost quite some ground. But again, we have an example that it's possible. Zambia's history tells us that you can organize agriculture and it can work for the purpose you want it to work. We've done that before. The case of Malawi tells us that political will can transform agriculture within 2 to 3 years to a sector that is contributing a lot to livelihoods and to GDP. Okay. Kenya and Ethiopia, and including Egypt, tell us that if you encourage entrepreneurship in agriculture, you can be very productive and it can lift many people out of poverty. Thank you.
That's fantastic, Dr. Christian. Mr. Bimbe, have you got any follow-up question or any comment?
Yeah, that was very, very exciting knowledge to get. So we've got really areas that we can pick and learn from it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we are not a learning society because these things used to be there, but we haven't done, which is quite revealing. And the idea that even in Malawi they had that structure, the political will to move ahead. That's a very, very interesting point. Just my question is then, in the most recent past, and this comes to what you've already alluded to, is agriculture making money? Is it a hobby? Is it something we keep sending money back to the village? So, it has become the in thing for an emerging middle class to venture into farming. But how many of these undertakings are actually becoming sustainable enterprise ventures? Or are they only surviving because the financier also has other income? So you kind of have this situation where weekends, tamarind season, everybody rushes. I've got a farm. I go to my farm. Yeah. So you that land is actually more productive, probably 4 months of the year. The rest is. So is that sustainable? Can that contribute? And how do we shift that mindset?
One of the things I do is to teach at wherever I am. I identify a university nearby and I teach part-time. So in the time that I've been working within Zambia, I have teaching normally to be graduate students, master's level. And so these will be kind of middle income. They are managers in their workplaces and they want to upgrade themselves. And so I'll be taking a course, maybe entrepreneurship. And I would ask them, I would say a number of you here have small holdings, pieces of land you call farms. How many of you are making money from those pieces of land? Okay. Now, we need to reflect. Of course, there are many factors that affect profitability, but are we looking into those issues? Are we trying to address them? Are we being careful how we're venturing? Have we planned? Okay. I remember one student at the end of a semester actually asked me to do a business plan for his agribusiness, and he did do quite well. He's given me feedback over time, and it did actually begin to grow. Because one question is, do you have a roadmap? What are you trying to achieve? And have you reduced it to numbers so that it's very clear? The benefit of your education is that you can be very purposeful and very clear about how you're going to go about this venture called agriculture. How many of our educated Zambians who have pieces of lands are walking that process? These are mindset issues. Issues of entrepreneurship do not respect education. Okay. When you are in a society that is generally not very entrepreneurial, no amount of education will change that. What changes that is a shift in mindset, which allows you now to begin to leverage on your education to create wealth in different ways. And one of which would be how you work with your piece of land. So again, this is an area where I feel we need champions. We need leaders in different spheres of life who harness the potential that we have amongst the urban educated individuals and sees how we work with them to create wealth. We do have some champions in the avocado sector. I'll tell you, for instance, we have, I won't mention names, a gentleman, well-known and very well respected, who is working in that space and is rallying people around. And we can see that there is this emerging, subsector in avocado production and export in Zambia. There are champions behind that. It's not happening by chance. Okay, we may find one or two other examples that we can point to. One political leader had a major banana farm in his home area. I won't mention names again. I remember during that time, many other people went into banana farming. People look for examples. Even if they're educated, they still need mentors. They still need role models. And those are still missing. And because of that, we have many small people holding on to land that is not very productive, and they're not making money out of that land. So it's a shift in mindset towards being more entrepreneurial, which in this case we'll discuss more later, involves taking calculated risk, seeing opportunities, and devising mechanisms to take calculated risks so that you can reap the benefits of venturing into that opportunity space. That is still missing even amongst the educated. Thanks.
Mr. Bimbe, you asked that question. Any comments, any follow-up?
Thank you very much. Yes, I did ask that question because it's something that happened, and Christian has really elaborated about having, a roadmap, having a calculated risk. My question is, if I follow up, is how then do we graduate those people that are venturing into that kind of space really to be much more productive? Are the incentives in terms of the market, in terms of you've talked about support, champions. What about financing? Because I believe a lot of these folks might end up just using their own salaries or whatever allowances they might get from wherever and prop up that. So there isn't that, maybe that thing that can make us graduate into that commercialization. What's your comment on that?
Right. In an environment where there are not enough private sector champions that can help transform society to become more entrepreneurial, the responsibility still goes back to the government of the day, because ultimately they are responsible for overall economic management and stimulating different sectors which they feel are important for the development of the country as a whole. Okay, so the role of government remains even in such a case. So government can, through the different institutions that may exist or may be created, depending on what they're trying to do, may actually set up hubs that become rallying points to help tap into potential that may exist. For instance, information about the market potential in urban centers, okay? Because most of the middle class individuals that have small holdings have their farms in peri-urban areas, okay? Now, there are huge opportunities for peri-urban farming that feed into urban centers. What are the opportunities within these centers? Let's pick a place like, we don't even have to pick Lusaka, let's pick Solwezi, for argument's sake. There is major industrialization in mining happening in that area. What are some of the opportunities that exist that needs to be highlighted so that you create excitement? At the very minimum, government has the responsibility of undertaking one form of research and profiling information to say, hey, this is the situation when it comes to production of this or demand for that, and so coordinating that kind of a process, working with various institutions. That's number one, at the very basic level. There is that, because you want to create something close to perfect markets where there is enough information for whoever may be interested in venturing, because lack of information is a major barrier to entrepreneurship. I mean, if you don't know what the risks are and what the opportunities are, then you're not going to think of going in. So that is a starting point that we can point in terms of what can we do, okay? Then the other core is on the side of the various individuals that are able to venture out. Financing is not the starting point in agribusiness development, okay? Financing comes at the back of having some demonstration of the fact that there is potential here for growth if financial resources are introduced. And I work in this space, and so I interact with many people, and this is an issue I keep coming up against. Great businesses did not start with external financing. It starts with your own money prove the concept at a small level, document that and show that this thing is very purposeful and very clear, and use that to approach financiers. Yes, we do not have a very well-developed financial system for agriculture, and part of the work I have done is actually training financial institutions, banks, that have been setting up agriculture, agri-finance units, okay? So they're also struggling. That's a supply side issue that is there, it's real. But you see, even the supply side is not encouraged if the demand side is ready. Why should a bank position itself to provide millions of kwacha in agricultural finance when they scope the environment and they notice most people are not at a point where they can receive money which the bank keeps on behalf of depositors? Remember, a bank keeps money on behalf of depositors. So it cannot be careless about how it lends that money. So they'll do assessments and they're still lending as well, okay? So there's work being done there. But there's also work that needs to be done on the part of those that are trying to access financing by demonstrating in a small way what they're capable of doing and using that to begin now to argue, to lobby. The farmer organizations need to step up and champion that on behalf of farmers. That aspect is not very big. I have worked again with farmer organizations, and I know this is not something that I've read. I know that farmer organizations are not talking about agriculture finance to their members so that their members are prepared to access and what they need to do to access finance. They're not talking about agriculture finance enough to the financial institutions, okay, so that they can also be organized, okay. So that's the private sector side. Agriculture finance is a space that even the government needs to play in, okay. We had Lima Bank, okay, which had its challenges. It could have been organized better, and so it failed to be sustained, okay. But governments everywhere have a foot in agriculture finance. Yes, they have to be careful not to crowd out the private sector. You must not go in the space where the private sector can also go and start lending there. Then you are taking the place of a more sustainable system, because private sector systems are generally more sustainable. But there is a space where there are individuals that will find it very difficult to access private sector finance. Are we using public money to stimulate agriculture entrepreneurship? Because if it's properly targeted, it can be invested in young people that may not be bankable right now, but who can demonstrate something, so that actually the idea is government comes in to take the initial risk, work with them up to a level where they have demonstrated their ability, then hand them over to the private sector. Now they have a track record. They borrowed from government, which was willing to take risk on them, and now there's a record. They can now work with the private sector. It's a very systematic process that must be properly organized. Currently, the money that is available in public institutions is mainly finding its way to politically exposed persons, what we call PEPs. That is known, okay? And I'm not pointing any fingers. If we just do an audit of the different financial institutions, and there are some audits happening right now, we know that politically exposed individuals have ended up getting the lion's share of monies that are intended for those that cannot easily access private sector financing. So what hope are you giving the young people? Okay. Now, when they see those things, because these things are not private, they're not hidden, they are visible. You create a certain level of desperation amongst young people. They lose the drive to go into entrepreneurship, and they resign to menial activities. They're now willing to get a job, even if it doesn't pay them very well, because they feel this is something stable and predictable, because if I try to go that way, there are major actors that are crowding us out and getting what should have been ours. So it is actually damaging society to allow a situation where politically exposed individuals are accessing finance which more disadvantaged individuals should have access. Political will is what will stop it, because, you know, over time, these clusters have grown roots, okay? it would have been easier to prevent. Now that we allowed it to happen, they have grown roots, they have become very powerful, okay? It will take strong political will to actually uproot them. It has been done in certain places, it can be done even here in the country. I think we have to some extent even done it before in this country. So it is something that needs to happen so that we have a system that works for everybody, including the poor. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I just make another follow-up on that, on the same? You've quite elaborated nicely how we can fix some of the issues on the supply side, which is good. But I still feel, again, there could be something also happening on the demand side. We not long time ago, we had the issue of onions coming in from South Africa. We had issues of farmers complaining. Yet we've got a lot of wastage going in. One just needs to drive around Lusaka. You'll see people with vegetables in a street corner, open van, selling vegetables. So what is broken in that supply chain? Because I know, I can understand big supermarkets, they want consistent supply. They want predictable supply. How do you fix that part of the equation?
Again, it takes us back to levels of entrepreneurship, okay? If you are going to grow tomato, okay, as you are preparing to invest in tomato production, what have you targeted as your market? What arrangements have you made to ensure that you have a reasonable chance? It may not always work, okay? There's always risk, but you have a reasonable chance of being able to offload that tomato at a good price. I work with smallholder farmers and other business owners, and more often than not, I encounter this situation where production has happened before market has been nailed down, okay? If you're driving along let's say Lusaka Copper Belt Road, okay, you will reach places where you have 60, 70, 80 people selling tomato, okay? They're all trying to sell tomato, okay? And in my work, I have engaged some of these and said, okay, you're all trying to sell tomato and you are depending on vehicles stopping to buy that tomato. The volume of tomato you have here can be clustered and delivered to institutions that I know are looking for tomato, okay? And they'll offer that tomato at a good price. But are those individuals seeking to leverage on the opportunity that exists by collaborating? They are all trying to sell as individuals, and they're fighting each other even as you stop there with your vehicle trying to buy, At the end of the day, a lot of that tomato is wasted, okay, because they don't manage to sell as much as the tomato that's there, maybe not even half of that tomato. So as the tomato is being wasted, for them to recover money, because they may be selling 40% of their stock, for them to recover that money, they have to increase the price of that tomato, because remember, they bought say 100 boxes of tomato. If they only sell 40, they must recover the cost of 100 boxes of tomato. Okay, so it means that the cost of 100 tomatoes must be recovered in 40 boxes plus their profit, and they're using that money for livelihoods. They must go back and order more tomato. So in the end, you have tomato that is artificially expensive because they have to agree that you must not sell less than this price. They have to collude on that one so that they can recover. So in the end, the buyer is losing, the seller is losing. It's a vicious cycle. So entrepreneurship is what comes in. When you are producing, what is the plan? That's why we insist on, even if it's not a very elaborate business plan, even if it's for those that can't write, it is verbal. But if someone asks you a question, are you clear in your mind about how you're going to go about it? Are you willing to collaborate? Because success in entrepreneurship comes from collaboration. We know that societies that collaborate, even in Zambia, we talk about certain people groups that have learned to work together. And through that working together, we have watched them become very successful. So are we willing to work together? These are social cultural barriers we have to confront. And I go back again to say we need champions that are respected by these people, that are willing to sit with these people and are willing to say, hey, this is not okay. If each of you keep trying to succeed on your own, you are all going to fail. Let me quickly give you an example that is not in agriculture, but just a demonstration of how champions can create change. At one point, we got to a situation where, bear with me here, but urinating in public became very normal. I remember in the 90s, you were walking in Lusaka and someone will just stop there, and you have all sorts of places with foul smells because corners are being used for urinating. And do you remember a political leader, he was not even president, he was senior district governor, who said, this is not okay. We can't have that. First of all, he talked to the police who had accepted it as normal, that there's a law that forbids such a thing. So could you please start arresting these people? And there was a law. So I think people were paying something like 50 kwacha, or nothing big, but the embarrassment of having been arrested because you were urinating in the wrong place. I remember he would even make statements like, I'll take a picture of you if I see you, and I'll send it to your mother-in-law, because men were the main culprit. We watched a situation where change actually happens. Society began to reflect again, to say, is this okay? No, but it's not okay. This is not where we come from. We are not supposed to be here. And over time, what was supposed to be a problem that can't be solved changed. I'm using just that as an example of where a champion with, in this case, political will, managed to address what you could have thought is not an important issue and it can't be addressed. Similarly, we need champions who can step into a space and question something that we have accepted as normal, but it's not, okay? And begin to say, how can we change this? How do we collaborate? Because cooperatives have a place in enterprise development. How do we build systems that can lead to trust, so that if I bring my 20 boxes of tomato, I will not be swindled? What can we do? Those are the kinds of conversations we should be having. The more educated also collaborate with the less educated, because they can provide services that can provide assurance that if 30 smallholder farmers put tomato together, they can access a big market, they can supply and make good money. So it is those kinds of mechanisms we need to build, and it calls on all of us to rethink, because we're accepting things that are actually not normal. They're not okay. But we have resigned ourselves to say, well, this is what it is, so we have to work like this. So you have 60 people selling tomato to vehicles that are passing by the road. That doesn't make sense.
That was fantastic, Christian. But before I ask you the question, I think where Mr. Bimbe was leading to was, do we have enough? He gave an example of onion.
Yeah.
ShopRite was importing onion,
Yeah.
and they were saying there was shortage of onion, but in some other parts of the country,
Yeah.
there was a lot of onion. So, do you think there is need for, like Minister of Agriculture, to
Yeah.
have a data center
Yeah.
where they can show people what people are producing in different parts of the country,
Yeah.
how much they are selling them, so that it's also easy for shops like
Yeah.
ShopRite not to import onion when there's because there might be shortage of onion in Lusaka when there's a lot of onion in Chivombo or a lot of onion in Mumbwa. Don't you
Yeah.
think there is need to have a place where people can people can go and check where can we find onion, or
Exactly.
how much is chickens are selling in
Yeah.
Kasumbalesa, or so that if I've got chickens in Lusaka and they are not moving, why can't I take them to Kasumbalesa? And the information has to be in real time.
Exactly.
Like if I've got 1,000 chickens today, I look at the market in Lusaka is not doing well. Then I discover that I can sell more in Kasumbalesa. Why can't I drive to Kasumbalesa and sell those? Do we have
Yeah.
do we have such kind of? We don't have that kind of data. What can we do to do that?
Yeah, in fact, right, you have pointed out rightly, and as I had said earlier, at the very minimum, government has a duty to reduce some of the imperfections that exist in markets, because markets are not perfect, but we must do all we can to make them as close as possible to being perfect. And an important element is information, what we call information asymmetry being a big problem, okay? So government has a duty to build mechanisms. Look, they have a choice to either do it or create an environment where someone steps in and does it. Whichever the case, they have a role to play so that there is information made available, not just about the current, there is the past, because there are trends that you want to pick up. Where have things been coming from the past? Where are we today? Where do they seem to be going when we look ahead? So that using that kind of information, then individuals and other businesses that are being set up can plan and say, okay, things look good in this direction, okay? Just like a person investing on the stock market who look at the performance of a share, of a stock of shares, and decide which one is still going up, which one do I remove my money, which one do I put my money in. But there's information available for people to do that. How have we failed to do the same thing in the area of agriculture? Such a critical sector, okay? So that's number one, the aspect of information. Secondly, governments have a duty to incubate, to nurture and incubate sectors that it feels has the potential to grow. What this means is that there might be need for some form of protection at some point and some form of incentives to help deepen, so that we don't have a lot of onion this year and we run out of onions next year. So such kind of vulnerability or fluctuations tell you that there is not as much depth. We do not have established producers that are able to supply the market. And if there's too much onion in the market, they can supply beyond the borders, because there are markets for onions beyond borders. So we should actually not run out of onion. What we should have is enough onion for the local market, and if it's too much, we extend. But also that requires information being available within the region and beyond. And again, government has a role to play so that we stabilize markets, so that some people can just specialize and become good at producing onions. They even become more productive because they keep doing it year after year. And because of that, the price will even come down because they have become more efficient, and that benefit can be passed on even to the consumer. So that is very important. Now, I want to balance off my point here. Government has a role to play to incubate, to nurture subsectors, okay? But government does not have a duty to kind of continually protect sectors that are just inefficient or are not working well. So it's a balance. So there has to be a strategy that says we're going to support these 3, 4, 5 sectors, and over the next 3 years, we're going to identify players, support the players. We're going to put some effective measures that give them an advantage over imports. You may not be able to put import barriers because you have signed agreements with other countries, but there's another way. You can provide incentives which lower their cost and make them more competitive. Whatever way you look at it, government can actually make local production more competitive, can nurture them so that eventually when they mature, when they have got to a certain point, they can compete with outsiders. So we can't continually prevent ShopRite from importing onion, even if we have local onion. That is supposed to be a right that they can have. They must choose between local onion or imported onion, okay? That is in the long run, okay? In the long run, it can't continue. In the short term, it is possible to say, no, if we leave it open like this, we will never develop our local sector. So we may provide incentives that help improve the local sector, and then step back and tell them, compete with ShopRite for a market. ShopRite will buy from you or buy from elsewhere. So you are competing with South Africa. You are competing with China for fish or anything else. But a time must come when locals must be allowed to compete. If they die even after being incubated, then that is fate, that's it. There's nothing we can do, because local industries cannot be protected into the long term, but they can be given incentives for them to be nurtured and to be incubated so that they can match up to the international suppliers. Because even those were incubated, There is no place where businesses have grown without incubation. The US can't tell you that when you start providing incentives, you are doing a wrong thing. You're just supposed to let them compete. Up to this very day, the US government provides incentives in agriculture. Okay, China provides incentives in agriculture. Okay, up to this very day. South Africa had an advantage because it used the oppressed labor to build wealth. Okay, it had a head start. So now you can't say, why are we not competing in South Africa? Our histories are different. They have become a major player, but look at where they're coming from and how they got there. They took advantage of a situation and developed wealth, and now they can't tell us, no, you must not help your farmers. Why are they not competing like us? We have different pathways. We are not where you are, but we must do something similar to what you have done, maybe in a better way, for us to get where you are. So there is support required, there is nurturing required, but at the end of the day, in the long run, you must swim or sink, and we must always get to that point. It must be part of the strategy to get to that point, but then we must do what we need to do for us to get to that point.
That's fantastic, Christian. Mr. Bimbe, have you got a comment or something?
Yeah, it's just I just want to hear Dr. Christian's thoughts. So we look at it. We've looked at this agriculture. We've looked at the supply side. We've looked at also the demand side. Yeah. Don't we think we need something also to incentivize the middle, which is the logistical infrastructure around that? For example, a lot of vegetables, they are perishable. We need some sort of cold storage chains. Patrick mentioned about a marketplace for information where people can check prices. How do you incentivize that sector to grow? Because it sits within that middle of between the supply and the demand side.
What we call trade facilitation, okay, at a larger scale, but something similar even at a domestic level, is the primary responsibility of government. Again, this is not just about trying to, bash any government, and I'm not mentioning any specific government, but the reality is that trade facilitation, whether it's at domestic level or internationally, is a role that governments play in a big way. So investment in infrastructure, again, if you go back to the 70s into the early 80s, you remember how we knew that roads would be graded before the onset of a planting season. Roads would be graded. Okay, it was without question. I could get 1975 is the first time I went to my home village, 75, 76, from Ndola, Copper Belt. Okay, my father was driving a Fiat 124 saloon car. I was able to get to my home village in Northern Province. Okay, in fact, my father's village was even further out, deeper, and my mother's village as well. But we were able to drive in a saloon car to get to the village. Much of it was gravel, but because it was routinely graded, you could use a saloon car to get to the village. Okay. Now, that is government's role in terms of investing in infrastructure and managing infrastructure. That's critical. Okay. Government has a role to play in ensuring that telecommunication is working. Okay. Is it about giving incentives to private sector players to invest in telecommunication infrastructure? Maybe that's something they can think about. But whatever that, another issue maybe I can mention, infrastructure has been deteriorating in Zambia. We peaked at some point where cell phone communication was very good. Internet was very good many years back. Okay. But have you noticed that we've begun to struggle? There's very limited investment in maintaining cell phone infrastructure. And we know what has been happening in that space. If you followed it, these big institutions are changing hands, and when they buy, they want to recover their money, so they're not initially investing in capital and things like that. Okay, so government has a role to play to hold them accountable. If they have been given investor type licenses with all the incentives that come with that. There has to be a requirement that they're investing in particular locations and they're managing that infrastructure well in particular locations. That way a rural farmer can pick up a phone and check what the price is at the market. Should I deliver my produce today if I have a choice, or tomorrow, or who should I talk to? So that before I set off, I've nailed down the market, I'm basically just delivering. Maybe I shouldn't even travel with my produce because I can give a transporter here and phone the other person to expect the produce to be received on the other end, because the transporter lives in my village. They will still come back. I can confirm that the produce has been delivered. So that is the benefit of technology. So government has a role to play in physical infrastructure and even non-physical infrastructure, but that is an important role that can ensure that markets can work even for those that are in rural areas. Otherwise, we have a crowding of individuals living rural areas into urban areas, and we're creating a problem there where we have street vendors in Lusaka, on every street in the CBD, and we're struggling with that problem. And that's just trading now. And also crime is going up because, they are looking at other opportunities for them to survive. So, and then big businesses are moving out of the CBD because of that crowding and the risk of being there. So it's kind of multiplying into other problems. But what should we have done? We should have championed issue of creating wealth from land, demonstrate that, provide the incentives. One leader used to talk about going back to the land, okay? It was not very attractive because he was not championing commercialization, okay? I have interacted with another leader who used to talk about the village concept. He's still alive even now. He used to talk about village concept, that if I become president, I will work with the village concept. I remember speaking to him on a one-on-one and saying, look, if you're going to call it village, when people are trying to run away from the village, no wonder they are criticizing your concept. Isn't there another way in which you can sell the concept? What is it about the concept that you can use and name it a descriptive name that speaks about the good about that concept, and not using a label that is repulsive to people, okay? Because people complained, he wants to take us back to the village, and because he's a military man, he might enforce it and insist, and I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. But at the end of the day, that was a champion that had a very good concept, but maybe didn't package it very well. But we still have chance to actually demonstrate the value of making use of land, being productive, and being entrepreneurial and creating wealth even at that point. We are busy creating farming blocks, but they are becoming retirement villages, okay? They are not, most of them, and I've interacted with a number of them, and I'm following a number of processes. Many of them that were developed earlier are not production centers, okay? They have become retirement villages where a person will buy 5 hectares, and when they retire, they go and settle there. They have built a house, they have done this, and their children are sending the money for subsistence, but they have the space, the air, and they keep a few chickens, they grow some maize and sell and have a bit of money. But ultimately, they're not surviving off that piece of land, okay? So we need to inculcate the spirit of commercialization. It needs champions, and the government has an important role to play. There is a science behind how you can do that, by the way, okay? So it's not a politician who must do it themselves. Politicians need to get to a point where they can call experts in a room and say, this is the end point I want. Tell me how I can get there, and convince me that it can work, because I'm going to ask you questions from a layman's perspective, because I may not be an expert in that area. So I'll just ask very logical questions. There is a science around how you can not only ensure that agronomic and livestock practices are done well, which is the natural science, but how you can get people to buy into it, which is a social science, okay? You must work with both. How do you influence people? There's a broken down process of how you can move a person from believing one thing to believing another, okay? And you may not achieve it for 100% of those people. That's not the goal. you want to get 5% of them to buy into it, the early adapters. Once they have bought into it, they will provide a demonstration. It is that demonstration effect that convinces the next 90%. You always remain with a 5% that will never, the so-called laggards in marketing who never adopt it, okay? So that's fine. Every society has that element. But what you want is the 5% early adapters who provide a demonstration to the next 90%, so that overall 95% of this society can easily even look after the remaining 5% who are not going to adopt that kind of mindset. There is a science to that. So it is not fishing from the air. Others have done it, and they are very successful in different countries. Okay, that is something a politician with the sufficient willpower can actually say, me, I know what I want to get at the end of the day, but I may not know how to get there. You claim to be experts. Develop the roadmap. That's possible.
That's powerful, fantastic, Dr. Christian. Let's move on. The next question is, how can we create structural economic change that moves many, especially the youth, into agriculture and into establishment of successful enterprises across agricultural value chains?
Okay.
Over to you, Christian.
Thank you. Now here is a word I'm going to use: economic transformation. Okay. Basically, it means changing the economic landscape. People are sitting in different places in terms of their economic activity. Now, you want to create an environment that causes some people to move from one place within the economy in terms of activity to another. Okay. You also want certain people to move within that same area of their economic activity from the level they are at to a higher level. Okay. So you're basically changing the economy through influencing where people are sitting and in the end what they are doing. So economic transformation is about answering the question, how do we get more people to move out from just being traders to being producers of something that is valuable? Okay. And because of our history, agriculture provides a great opportunity because we have the land, and most of us have tried one form of agriculture or another, so we're not completely ignorant. So now, economic transformation, which is the structural change, you're changing the structure of the economy. For a country like Zambia, can happen in one of the fastest ways by creating necessary incentives in agriculture. Let me give you an example. There was a time when the Zambia National Service was almost reintroduced, if you recall. Okay. Now, if you ask me, and from the work I have done, okay, and I've worked with even men and women in uniform, okay, if you ask me, Zambia National Service is very well positioned to lead youth participation in agriculture. First of all, they are not so much involved in war. These are peace times, okay? You have disciplined men and women, highly trained in technical fields, and also in sticking to a regime. If we say, let's go this way, even if the guns are being fired in that direction, a well-trained person in uniform will just think of how they can still approach that location in a safe way, but they do not flee. That is the level of training we've taken our men and women in uniform through. Okay, so now, if you use that kind of discipline and say, let's now address issues of youth and agriculture. So what should have been ZNS camps for training them in many other things? They could include even military training. That's not a bad thing, actually. Okay, but the focus is on agriculture development. Get a cadre of young people, work with them, instilling certain values and certain levels of discipline, and working with them to actually do work that always produce results. Look after a plant, it will give you results. In fact, in my work in agriculture, even where I am here in Sierra Leone, I tell people that I work with that a plant will always tell me what you've been doing. I don't have to be there. I've been working in the livestock sector. I headed an institution for 8 months here in Sierra Leone that was into poultry. And I would tell my subordinates, okay, the chickens will tell me what you've been doing even when I've not been there. The rate of egg production is linked to what you did in the last 2 days, you know. So I will know if you're looking after a chicken, the rate of egg production will tell me, okay, or the rate of growth if it's a broiler, or if it's a tomato. I have my own farms and I do agriculture production myself. And I would tell my workers, even if you have 5,000 plants, you have to know them one by one. You know them, even their temperament. You know that that plant in the corner there is very temperamental, so I tend to eat much more, or that line of plants. Maybe the soil is not very good there because it was a hill. So the type of soil is different. So even when I'm applying water, I apply water differently there, okay, compared to there. When I'm putting manure, I don't distribute manure evenly right across the crop, you know, because I know which part needs it more than the other, okay. So this ability to focus on doing what you're supposed to do will almost always produce good results. So now imagine you have an environment that inculcates discipline and focus and says, let's work. This is your benefit at the end of the day, a short term, and these are the long-term benefits. And work with those young people, teach them skills in agriculture, let them farm, let them get the benefits of their hard work, and let them move from that place having seen the benefits of doing things right. Even if all of them will not adopt agriculture, some will just run away and go back, okay? Imagine even if 20% of those actually did what they are supposed to do. If we picked up, you know, for argument's sake, let me pick a number, 1,000 young people. Imagine if only 200, which is just 20%, actually decided to take forward what they have learned and to grow it, okay? And because of the system they have gone through, they can be trusted a lot more and they can be supported further. It will still lead to transformation in the entire economy. Zambia only has 21 million people. That's not a lot of people. That is the number of people in some African cities. So that's not a lot. And for Africa, compared to many other places, change comes more easily because we are adapters, easy adapters. That is why we can, for Zambia, for instance, we have been able to change our political circumstances. If you've noticed, it's the only country in Africa that has removed a sitting president 3 times, okay? And we have changed the course of our circumstances, even economically. In our own lifetimes, we have seen things become good, become bad, and become good again, okay? So what we just need are demonstrators who can show that this can work, and they will influence a group of people. So 200 will lead to 2,000, it will lead to 20,000, it will lead to, you know, 200,000. And before you know it, it has become the in thing that you're wasting time in Lusaka. Because if you invested time in a 5-hectare piece of land and work with 3-4 other people, I'll make more money than I'm making here. Why am I suffering here? Okay. So that's a process that can be implemented. It's a very clear action point. It requires investment, but it always yields a return because of the nature of the activity that we are talking about. It's about growing crops. It's about looking after livestock.
Christian, that was fantastic. Mr. Bimbe, over to you.
Yeah, that was a very, very good point. Moving our young people or whoever wants to venture into agriculture, I want to believe that forcing people is not the way forward.
No.
However, there has to be those other incentives, which brings me to the other point. I know we talked about it earlier, the FISIP, which, as you explained, the intention was good. However, the implementation, it morphed into something else. The new government is thinking, probably they have, I think there is a policy that they are switching that to a comprehensive agriculture support program. With your knowledge, with your experience, how should that look like? And if at all, what would you advise the government from what you've discussed in terms of encouraging the youth? What components, what should it show? What should we have instead in terms of incentivizing and moving that forward?
Okay. Well, the first thing I would want to say to any government that is saying we're moving from one thing to another is to be careful not to change the label, but retain the substance of what you are doing. Okay, so we can change it from FISIP to a comprehensive agricultural development program, but at the end of the day, we can still be doing the same thing. Okay, so that's the first thing. Okay, the change in names must be reflected in the substance of what you are saying you want to do. That's number one. Number two, we must live up to the word comprehensive, because dishing out fertilizer and seed is not a means to sustainable development. It can even have the reverse effect, market distorting effects, and creating confusion, creating dependency, and all the negative things that can come up. It is about saying inputs are just one component. What are the other components? What else must be part of the package? The hardware and the software. Okay, so the hardware may be the things that are made available, but the software is what kind of messaging, what kind of support? Because right now, our extension system is dead. There are the extension workers all over the place. I interact with them. I spend a lot of time there. Our extension system is dead. Okay, so even when there is training to upgrade their competencies so that they can be more effective, if that communication reaches district level, who goes to that training so that they can make per diem? It is the district the agriculture coordinator or other more senior people at the district level. Meanwhile, the training was meant for an extension worker. Okay, so in the end, these people are lagging behind. They are forgotten. They have just become farmers, a number of them, in the communities where they have been placed. Okay, using the knowledge they gained from school to do something for themselves. Okay, so you need to revive the extension system. That must be part of the comprehensive, and it's not difficult because these are people that have got the fundamental knowledge and skills. So to upgrade their knowledge, to teach them the practical aspects that are emerging is not very complicated. Within about 18 months, you can actually begin to demonstrate the benefit of having said, look, you can do this way, this way, this way in terms of practice, agricultural practice. And then also we want to teach you how to influence communities. That's not so much, it's a social cultural skill. How do you facilitate development? How do you work with the community so that you are an influencer? Those are now social type skills. Again, you can build those and deploy these people back to their communities, even new places where they can have a new beginning because they are known for one thing in one area, because they even lost hope. So they might not even be effective champions, but move them to another area and say, here is a new beginning, here is the knowledge, here is the skill. Can you now do it? Here is the incentive. These same people can actually be transformed. So the extension system needs to be improved. I have interacted over many years with the directorate in agriculture called the Policy and Planning. I'm not sure if it's still called that. The last few years I've been traveling a lot. But the Directorate of Policy and Planning, there's a time when that directorate was very ineffective, and yet it's at the heart. It provides direction for what happens within the ministry, by its name, Policy and Planning. Now, can you imagine when you make that directorate ineffective? So the different directorates now are disconnected. They are just working independently, and when funding is allocated, it's about getting per diem. So their activities are about just making sure they can share whatever allocation is provided. Right now, look at the proportion of money provided for FISIP compared to doing everything else in the Ministry of Agriculture. So all those are things that can be changed by decisions. These are not complicated things. These are things that can say, okay, next year we're going to change this year, and we're going to change that, and we're going to engage in that, and these are the resource allocations that we're going to. Let's do things differently from next year. That is possible, but it needs political will, because there'll be resistance. We have got used to things happening in a certain way, and if you're going to change, then you'll be going against the tide, and you must be determined and demonstrate your determination if you're going to get the results that you desire.
That was fantastic, Christian. Mr. Bimbe, if you got a follow-up question before we move forward.
I don't have any question at the moment.
Okay, okay. Christian, Dr. Christian. By the
please,
way,
just call me Christian. Thank you.
Christian, yeah. And by the way, Mukelevai, welcome to the program. We're gonna give you a chance to ask a question or make a comment soon. Mukelevai, welcome.
Oh, thank you so much. Abalishani mukwaye ba Chileshe wesu.
Endita mukwaye enisha.
Kale balika bo Bimbe mchwani.
Enisha.
Yeah. So, Christian, in the more recent past, it has been not. Zambia has also witnessed foreign investment into large-scale agriculture. To what extent has this stimulated significant local interest, or are there many Zambian or are many Zambians content to find employment with these agribusinesses?
Okay. First of all, I must say that foreign direct investment in terms of large-scale players in agriculture is important. Okay, we must encourage that. It is important part of an economy at large. Okay, so that's important. But then how we promote FDI, how we promote foreigners coming in matters, because at the end of the day, we have an agenda. It's not FDI for its own sake. We have an agenda and we're trying to achieve it, and we must look at where do we have intersectional space. There are many things you want to do and there are many things I want to do. So when you come, which space is intersection, so that we know the things that we will not allow you to do because they don't fit within ours, and they also tell us the things we can't achieve from them. So we identify space where we can work together. If you're not careful there, you are going to bring in people in the name of foreign direct investment. They will abuse the country in different ways and go after some time. And what you have is nothing. We have seen that in other sectors. They come for a few years because they have investment licenses. After some time, they just abandon and go. And we're back to square one. So how we structure the investment arrangement? What are some of the conditions? Look, Zambia is positioned to dictate a lot of terms in terms of how these people come in, because of our endowment, our resource endowment. So we are not begging investors to come. We have the leverage to actually define what we want and negotiate a bit around that, but still get much of what we want. Okay. If we're going to say these people are coming and they're going to provide 2,000 jobs, then we are already missing it. Are they coming so that they provide jobs? Is the end point a job for a Zambian? Ultimately, that is not an end point, because that is quite interim. You know, are we also ensuring that when they come in, other Zambians will move up, will begin to work in their value chain? What have we structured so that we have other Zambians who can collaborate with them, not on their farm necessarily, but within that value chain that will be created, so that we can see results even at that level? If we are a corrupt society, we are going to attract wrong type of investors. We're going to attract those that are coming to just take advantage of the country. You know, you have investors, and I've seen them with my own eyes. This is not theory. Who will come into a country, they know they can oil a number of players, decision makers, so they can do what they like in that country, in Zambia. I'm talking about Zambia. And they don't care the impact of their activities in that country. Are they taking advantage of the workers? Are they killing competition? Because they have the financial muscle to actually do that, and then come and manipulate the prices. Okay, so we need foreign direct investment because it's an important part of an economic portfolio of activities, but we're in a very strong position to dictate what happens. We have examples of Malaysia and maybe other countries that have said, this is what we're looking for. If you're not interested, please find another place. Eventually, those people have still come. In fact, in my interaction with investors, they have said what we just need is a predictable environment. You decide what you want. We'll come up with business models that can still function and be profitable in what you have dictated. The biggest complaint of an investor in my interaction with them is not so much that you have set very hard terms. It is that you keep switching the terms. So it is becoming very difficult for us to plan and know what we can still come and do in this country. Okay? So set your terms because you know what you want. Sell those terms. Those that want to come, work with them and make sure that the terms include inclusive development that will stimulate others to also participate. That's one side. The other side is if you tell the Zambians that what you are looking for are jobs, because we talk about jobs more than anything else, you create a mindset in which everybody thinks if I have a job, I am fine. Okay? So if you get an investor, they are saying jobs. You get another investor, it is jobs. So it is us, the political leaders, who are creating a mindset in which Zambians are very short-term in their thinking. They are looking for a salary and not profits and wealth that come with them being entrepreneurs. There will never be enough jobs in any country. Okay? So we must have people going into entrepreneurship directly or those going into jobs because they want to transit into entrepreneurship so that others can come in. The ultimate is being on your own, because even if you have a job, you're still going to retire and you won't retire so old. You still need to be able to be busy doing something. So whichever way you look at it, you must think about doing something that creates wealth on your own. That's what we should be preaching as leaders.
Fantastic, Christian. Mr. Bimbe, I haven't forgotten about you. We'll come to you. Mr. Bimbe, any comment, any question before we can give the platform to Honorable Mukelevai?
Yeah. My question, I don't have any comments at the moment. My question is, of recent past in Zambia, I think we when we talk about agriculture, currently, you know, there are different types of agriculture. So is it just about livestock? Is it just about crops? What other things? Fish? How do we balance that? Because remember, we have both arable land. We've got land that can be used for livestock, but we seem to, probably from just scanning the Facebook, the internet, we seem to be doing quite well on the livestock part. Where are we doing really badly on the other part of agriculture? Because we can see the effects with minimum prices. Yeah.
First of all, I must mention that I'm not an agronomist. I've studied agribusiness, but I'm not an agronomist. I'm also obviously not a livestock expert. I'm a development worker that works in agriculture, seeing how it can work for the country, okay, in terms of economic development. But from interactions with experts and from many years of working in the sector, it is very clear to me that we must be careful how we think about agriculture, okay? First of all, we start splitting it into certain components and neglect certain others, okay? But even just splitting it, when you have a Minister of Agriculture, then you have a Minister of Livestock, that's already confusion. Look, whichever way you look at it, you know, who's going to give me an explanation why we should have a Minister of Agriculture and a Minister of Livestock? I've been around long enough to know some of the politics that happen amongst the technocrats, by the way, okay? When you bring livestock into the mainstream ministry, livestock is neglected. They are seen like a little brother on the side, and a lot of activities do not take sufficient account of them. So they try to fight it so that they can, you know, be a prominent player, because they should be a prominent player. They feel they are losing the battle, so they champion that they should have their own ministry. Now we are splitting something that is connected, because remember, we are still serving the same community and the same household, which will have crops and will have livestock. So now if you start splitting them, what are you saying? Because in practice, there is no divide between me growing crops and me keeping livestock. If you come on my farm, you find I have rabbits, I have ducks, I have, chickens, and I have goats, and then I'm also growing crops. So now you're telling me for just that one activity, because for me it's integrated, I'm getting something from one and using in another, some of the waste from the crops is going into the feed here, some of the manure there is going there. So for me, it's about integrated agriculture systems. So you are telling me I'm supposed to work with two separate ministries. So those are some of the things we have to be very, very, kind of pragmatic, very bold, and just say, look, guys, we understand the problems. Let's solve the problems. Let's not put a bandage on a wound without cleaning the wound. Let's solve the problem. That's one. The other one is, if we're going to take the science of crops and livestock as the solution, then we are missing it, because we're dealing with a human being. Okay? So it is not enough to tell a human being, if you do 1, 2, 3, you're going to get this. I have worked in that space and I've made those mistakes myself. You just show them exactly what they need to do, and they will even know what they are supposed to do. But we have learned that awareness does not always lead to behavioral change. We know that. In fact, when I started farming, I was 27 years old, 28 years old. I was even laughed at, because at that time, it was retirees who bought farms. So now, the people that taught me how to farm were locals who are not even doing the things they are telling me. I picked it and I began to do better than them. They had learned from the Kaunda era and they knew exactly what to do. Okay? And they actually came, and because it was amusing to see a young person trying to farm, they volunteered information. That was my claim to what I started doing, because I grew up in an urban area. I didn't do as much farming as the backyard that we would do. So it is not enough to tell people to do what to do. It is now the social dynamics of saying, how do we influence them? That is not what a typical agriculturalist is trained to do. Let's bring that on board. Okay, so agriculture is a social cultural activity apart from the science of it. It's more than just crops and livestock. There's a social cultural dimension that we must integrate and say, let's use this aspect to influence people. Okay, within the practice of agriculture, we need to popularize the things like agroforestry, and we are struggling with aquaculture and many other facets that create an integrated approach. So if you tell me you're going to do comprehensive agriculture, as we are being taught, how is it going to be integrated? Because that's how you even manage risk. That's how you lower your costs, because you're taking an integrated approach that allows you to have something to sell at any point, even if one is faced with certain disasters that will almost always happen now and then. You can easily pick up from another one. So it's part of your risk management. Are we educating our people that? So agriculture is more than just crops and livestock, and they shouldn't be artificially separated. Agriculture has got a social cultural dimension that must be part of the comprehensive agriculture. Agriculture includes many other things. Now we're even talking about solar farms. It may not be conventional agriculture, but if I have land that I'm going to allow to stay fallow for some time, I could use it as my solar farm. I could do many things that can be part of my integrated process of agriculture. Let's think widely and let's think big, and let's encourage our citizens to go in that direction. Then you are going to say that is agriculture. Anything less is just doing something that's not going to take us out of the situation we're in.
That was powerful, Christian. One thing you've mentioned there is diversification, in terms of crops, instead of just doing one thing. What if there's a serious disease that will kill all the livestock? Then what is going to happen to you? So by doing so many other things, that's actually diversification, and also that's managing your risks also. So that's very powerful. That's very powerful. Any comments, Mr. Bimbe, before I can ask Bom Kelebai to comment or ask questions?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Christine. That was very good. At this juncture, I don't have any comment. Can have Bom Kelebai to chip in.
Bom Kelebai, over to you.
Thank you so much. I came very late, but I followed, and I'm so delighted to hear, to listen. I wish to just keep quiet and listen to this gentleman, our brother, Dr Christian Chileshe, speaking. I mean, I'm enjoying the knowledge that this gentleman has, and one wonders why we are still struggling when we have such kind of human resource, such knowledge, you know. What I can only say is that we have so many, the youths that we have today, Wachireshe, we have a lot of youths that are in urban areas, and you see the way I'm using we because I'm also part of the youths. No, I'm not. I've already passed that. I will simply say most of these youths, I mean the adults, we see that they have neglected, or we have forgotten about how to impact this knowledge into the new generation. Our youth today, they are lazy. Most of them, they are lazy. And we, the adults, are using them in politics, in a lot of illicit activities to gain money or to gain popularity. We can see we have examples of what is happening with the politicians, our politicians, those in government or those who are in opposition, the way they are using our young men. And we can tell that why are we still struggling today? We still even have meal shortages in the country when we have such a huge human resource that we could actually send those kids, those the youths, and ask or empower them with land, because they don't have lands. They are just roaming the streets. And these are youths that can be productive if the government and the elderly, the senior citizens, could disseminate, or rather impart knowledge, share the knowledge into these young men and show them how important agriculture can turn their lives around. They can have all these bling bling they are looking for if they to just go back and tilt the land or keep animals, or even that you said using the land for other innovative ideas, developmental projects. So it is so sad. I don't know, what do you think would be the best way to recruit and embrace these young men and women, to lure them into productivity, where they go and start doing farming, so that they could produce something and make money? They don't need to have to be PhD holders or to be diploma holders. They can simply, anybody, for as long as they are now adults, they have 5 senses, they are sane, and they can produce, they can do something. So I don't know what you think from your professional point of view. How do you think we can help this country? What message would you give to the elderly community? You know, I'm talking about those who have gone beyond the youthhood. Every adult, the parents out there, how do we help our young men and women to convince them to go back to tilt the land or utilize the land? Because Zambia has so much fertile land and have vast land. And how do we convince our chiefs, the custodian of customary land, in sharing this land with the youth, so that they could produce something at the end of the day and be comfortable in their livelihood? So that's my concern and my question. I think you can tell what I'm trying to say here. But otherwise, I am so delighted because we are so much into politics. Our youths today, they are lazy. tabalefwa, not even payad behind ka garden fiaka tomato. You are busy complaining, going on the street protesting, yet you are failing to have a small garden with vegetables out behind there. I mean, we have so much floods. We have so much we can utilize, even the very water. So I don't know, how do we develop? How do we inculcate this or harness this knowledge and put it into our youths so they could stay away from this illicit politics, illicit activities, drugs and everything, so they could do something positive and productive to our motherland. Natotera mkwai.
Over to you, Christian.
Thank you very much for that, Walvinda. You are speaking from the heart, and I hear you, and I feel with you, because I am also a parent with children and grandchildren, and as a parent, I've done some things right, I've done some things wrong. You've made mistakes in parenting. They say there's no person who teaches parenting. You learn from what you are doing, because your situation will be different from others. Although we do listen and learn from others, but your situation is very different, and you have to learn on the go and adapt. Okay, so there are a few things I have done in my own household. For instance, for me, there's nothing like pocket allowance for children from primary school, because there's so much that needs to be done around that you can do and earn your own money. So what that happens is it teaches this child that there are no free lunches, that the only way for me to generate wealth or money is for me to work. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is, when they have worked for that money, they spend it differently. If they are spending your own money, they spend it differently. But if they're spending theirs, you will see. You even are the one saying, but you need that thing. No, but I'm just trying to decide. First. But if it was my money, you would have easily just squandered it. So there are a few things that we can do. For the younger who can still do something, they need to think about that. I mean, when my children leave school, they go to the village. They go to and do something in rural areas. Okay. The most recent one, my son went. I got a farm in Kasama just after Chambeshi River in Nkolemfumu, Senior Chief Nkolemfumu area. Sub Chief Menga. And I left my son there. I traveled out of the country. He remained there, he with other workers. He was 17 years old. In fact, he was 16 before he even turned 17, because he finished school early. This is a boy who got very good grades. I mean, he had 6 points. It is the same typical urban child. But first of all, every year I go with them. They spend time with me on the farm. Part of their growth was on a farm. They go to the village, so they're not disconnected from that. And so I could leave him on a farm, and he stayed there for a few months. So there are things I'm doing that make sure my child is connected to reality, so that they just don't think for them things come easily. So that's me. And some things I've not done very well. I'm still learning. Okay, but that's at a local level. But there are also situations where the child is already an adolescent, and it's very difficult to see what can be done. One of the things we don't have enough, which a government should think about, is ensuring that you have a counseling system. We have a crisis. What you are describing is a crisis. It affects the future of this country. Just because people are not dropping dead now does not mean it's not a crisis. We can't wait until that time. So a government that sees this, especially when we're having speeches about morality and all sorts of things like that, which is a good speech that was made recently by our current president. How do we break that down to operationalize it? Because drug abuse is a very serious problem, very serious. I'm not too sure if there are many families that are not affected in one way or another. Even if your child is not a habitual smoker or user of drugs, chances are they have experimented with it. Okay? It's a very serious problem. What are we doing to address that? Okay, that's one area. But the issue of keeping them busy and them going back to the land, trust me, if you set up a program, marketed it well, you are not going to force anyone to go to a ZNS camp. Those that don't want, leave them. They will come in later, and some will never come in. So we're not trying to get everybody. But if you nicely branded it, understanding the people that you are targeting and the things that are important to them, the terminologies and, that kind of thing. And then you say, here is the opportunity. You'll be surprised how many people come. Recently, I was looking for a farm worker, okay? And I just needed someone with a certificate in agriculture. You should have seen the people that were applying. People want to do something meaningful for their own lives, okay? And there are not enough opportunities. Tell them, come and do something that will build you up to look after yourself, and you won't look for a job. You have people even with degrees willing to come, okay, and use those as a demonstration. Then as parents who have a reference point, we'll be telling our children, have you seen your friend? What has happened? Are you considering the next intake? And let's discuss. So more and more of them will go. By the end of 5 years, would have arrested what could have been a big problem. And because young people are in a formative stage, they change very quickly. Just like the way they change their clothes very quickly, if you've noticed. When fashion comes, they all start dressing in a certain way, and you just have to keep fighting them not to go too far. If you're going to demonstrate value in agriculture, they will all be saying, I just want to go and do my own farming. After I'm going to enjoy. It's going to be, I'll be my own boss. I'll be in a natural environment. I'll be this and all sorts of good things that we can market. So for me, that's the way to go. Whereas parents were doing something, the government is doing something, and we're working as partners, because my children are citizens of this country and the leaders. So we have a shared interest in developing them. So we need to work together, address drug abuse, and basically keep these kids busy. They will not take drugs when they are pursuing something. They are not, like you said, they have 5 senses. Give them a sense of purpose. Mentor them, support them, and you will see how even people we thought are useless can change. I have seen them with my own eyes, so I'm not speaking from theory. I can even give you examples. So change is possible, even for the most difficult case, for as long as they're still alive.
Thank you so much for that.
Christian, that was so powerful. But before we go to closing remarks, I know we're running out of time, but there's an important issue that you mentioned, and some people have even asked a question. I'm just putting it, Oscar Sitimera. But before you can answer that, I just want to incorporate that question into other things. As you have articulated, agriculture is very important, and you've clearly stated we need to commercialize agriculture or increase the emergent sector of agriculture. That is between the smaller farmer and the large scale farmer. And I've noticed, I've been in Zambia a few times. We met in Zambia last month. Remember, we met at APSA at Arcades. And I traveled around. I was living in the farms in Shantumbu. I've seen a lot of farms, big farms. I've been to those farms. There are not so many Zambians who are employed in the farming business. Even I've seen big farms owned by white people in Lusaka. I don't want to mention their names. We're not here to mention names, but you discover that they've employed their family members. Few Zambians are employed into the field, and those jobs are not something to write about home. But then you've talked about the need to commercialize agriculture, or the economy to move from mining into agriculture, which is very important, which every government from 1964 to today have been talking about. And then this guy is saying financing. Financing is an issue. And you mentioned about some public lending, an example of CEC. CEC, in this financial year, they are giving out about 365 million kwacha, and part of it is towards agriculture. But you mentioned about the corruption involved in some public institutions, lending institutions, and this happened a lot in the previous government, where most of the money went to politically connected people. And we believe this government has a political will, and we believe this should change. It might not change because the culture has been so terrible, and to change that culture, it's going to take a lot of time. But again, Christian, we've got Ministry of small medium enterprises. We've got Ministry of Agriculture. We've got Trade and Commerce. Most countries that are doing very well, including the UK where I live, the biggest employers are small and medium enterprises. In agriculture, you were saying emerging commercial farmers. They should fall in there. What the government does is, they know that in the UK, over 60% of people here in the UK are employed by these small scale, small and medium enterprises. Which we've got a potential here in Zambia in terms of agriculture. We've got land, we've got water, we've got good soil. So the government deliberately come up with policies that improves, and in a conducive environment that improves, that grows that small scale industry into a commercial industry, because they know that that's the breadlock of the economy. And what they do is, usually there are few lending institutions, public lending institutions, very few. But what the government has done is, they know that their job is not to lend money. There's going to be corruption. There's going to be red tape. There's going to be a lot of problems. So part of it, they use quangos. I think Mr. Bimbe knows that. They use quangos that lends money and that's their job. That lends money to the small businesses. They used that during COVID. You know, they were giving money, some grants to companies because they were not going to survive. Small companies, some of them were capital grants, some of them were revenue grants, some of the grants had to be repaid back. But the government also recognized free market economy. They recognize that banks are the ones that are supposed to lend money. So what the bank does is, say in Zambia, CEC has set aside 365 million. You know what the bank would do, what the government would do? They would say, no, we are not going to give that money out. We're going to talk to banks and tell them, can you please identify the small businesses? And these are the criteria. Please make sure there's no corruption business. But we're going to guarantee those loans at the lowest interest rates, because interest rates also is a problem. We're going to guarantee those loans. We've got a fund of 365 million. And you know what the government would do? They'll put that money in the bank. And not only that, that guarantee they've given to the banks, they also insure it. So if you've seen how the private sector is gaining, insurance companies have guaranteed that money. Banks are earning interest. Banks are lending that money. And you know, when you lend the money, it multiplies. So, and then you talked about extensive officers. In the UK, most of the SMEs, they don't have skills. But you know what the government does? They come up with a fund to train, to give skills to those people, carpenters, bricklayers, because they want them to be experts. They want them to have an NVQ, which is the minimum qualification. It's between high school and like a diploma or a certificate. So they want every skilled people in the small scale industry to have a diploma. And you know what they do? Some they teach them skills, entrepreneurship, everything they teach them for free. But you know who does that? private colleges, and then the government pays those private colleges because they want to have skilled people. And then in the case of Zambia, don't you think those extensive officers can be so well trained in entrepreneurship and everything so that they can train the local people? What do you think about that?
Okay, so let me just now quickly respond to it. You have raised a number of important things. Let me just quickly respond to them. If we say finance is the biggest problem, let's solve it. Or we say skills the biggest problem, let's solve it. We have tried all of those and they have not taken us forward. So there will always be someone who can give you an example of what has been tried in finance and things have failed. What has been tried here, it has failed, and there. And the simple reason has been this. We've been trying those things not in an integrated or comprehensive way. If you go out right now and just say, I'm lending money to young people so that they can do something sensible, you will not get your money back. The environment as it is will not enable you to get your money back. They will not. Some will just take the money, steal it. Some may not have the skills. They will not be able to recover it if they want it to pay back. Okay. If you go with just skill, you are going to teach them technical skills, and if we have not helped them to begin to vision what's possible beyond the skill, they will work their way through it, get basic qualification because they think they want to get a job. You are teaching them a skill for their own lives. They will use it to go and get a job. Look at how we have killed trade schools. We've turned them into academic institutions, artisans. Right now, Zambia has a shortage of artisans, practical trade skills, because even what should have been a trade school is now offering diplomas and possibly even degrees. They have become academic institutions because we believe in employment. The message being preached to us is employment. Okay? So now, each of the things that we can say is a problem has been tried, but because it has not been tried in an integrated manner, look, we must respect knowledge to a point where we say there's a science behind solving the problem. Okay? Unfortunately, a lot of our experts also just went to school to get the PhD so that they can show off. But let's challenge them to show their competence. You trained in this area. Come and show the skills. How do we solve this problem? Okay, because there is an integrated approach that says so much of this, when you are cooking, trying to have a good meal, you must know how much salt to put, how much water to put, how much that and everything else, and other spices to get a good meal. So now, if we want to address the problem of youth, and especially as far as agriculture is concerned, what is the mix and proportions of different things so that we can get the results? Money on its own, access to finance will not solve it. Skills will not solve it, and it won't solve it. Okay, so now it is about saying there has to be political will where someone says 3 of you sit here, or whatever, 10 of you. What's the roadmap? What's the mix, and why? Because you must answer the questions. I will ask. I can't just do things because you say that's the right thing and because you think you have a qualification. No. In fact, the reason why we take long to go to school, many years, is so that we can come and explain it to the illiterate person. That is why you take a long time in school. If it was just learning the basic thing, understanding it for myself, I would not last as long. So an expert must be able to explain what is very complex, break it down in a manner that the ordinary person can understand. That is the demonstration of education and not just schooling, because there's a difference between schooling and education. Okay, so now the point is, we need a combination of things that must deliver. And there's a science behind coming up with that combination and explaining why it has to be that combination and piloting it and learning from it, tweaking it a bit and using it and producing results. Okay, that's one. Number 2, the UK can use the approach you have referred to because they have done their homework. Developed countries invested in entrepreneurship development, changing mindsets. When I say entrepreneurship, I'm not talking about running a business. I'm talking about an innovative, creative, and risk-taking, but risk measurement type approach. Okay, you don't have to be in business to be an entrepreneur. You just have to have a certain mindset. And some entrepreneurs will be in business, others will be in science, others will be in politics, others will be in all sorts of spheres, so that the environment is looking at how it can become better, because people are sitting in different spaces. I can speak confidently about entrepreneurship because my PhD is in entrepreneurship, and I've addressed those in my own research and what I've published. So entrepreneurship is not about running a business. It is this societal shift in mindset so that some entrepreneurs will be in business. The Western world has done their homework so that when they now come and say, here is money, society is fertile for that. When you have a CEEC, Empowerment Commission, Citizens Empowerment Commission, what is empowerment? When they begin to think empowerment is giving out money, then you've lost it. Because I know when CEC was created, and I know the main message was it is not about money. Empowerment is not about giving out money. Other actors should deal with that. Ours is to help create an environment that is empowering. It is to shift mindsets. The greatest empowerment you can give a person is shifting their mindset so that they can see for themselves how to identify opportunities and how to exploit them. So if you ask me, CEC is not supposed to be known for giving out money. Other agencies, even if they're government, should deal with that. CEC should run with the original mandate for which it was created. So I wanted to emphasize that. So at the end of the day, we need to restructure how we are doing things so that we begin to build bottom up, begin to change the thinking and mindset of our people so that when we introduce money, it will be fertile ground. Or if we want to introduce money, what else must we introduce? What it's a cocktail of interventions that will make sure that this young person will not just take this money and use it for the wrong things. That is the kind of intervention that is needed because we have allowed things to slide to a level where we need those kinds of cocktails to solve what are problems right now.
That's fantastic, Christian. Mr. Bimbe, I can see you touching your chin. Anything you want to say here before
Uh,
we can go
I
to the
know.
closing remarks?
Thank you very much. I know it's
Okay,
deviating
okay,
from
okay. Any comments
but
and your closing remarks?
I like, yes, I like the what Christian has described about empowerment because that has always been my problem as well, where you have even Ministry of Youth giving out tankers, giving out money. It's been so much distorted that the word empowerment now doesn't make sense anymore in Zambia. It's about giving money. When CDF came up, it was about empowerment, form a cooperative and go and get money. So there wasn't this idea of what Christian is saying. What problems are we trying to solve? How do we do that? For example, you mentioned about giving loans. Banks can give loans, but government can guarantee those loans. Because banks, by nature, they've got all the risk management stuff. They know how to read a business plan. They know how to do that. And empowerment also, it has to be hand-holding. What is society wanting? I'm really intrigued with the whole of diplomas and trade schools. They used to be there, artisan. And one of the effects that I don't know whether people have noticed, when you talk to a lot of people that are building, they'll say, I prefer a builder from Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
And a builder from Zambia. It's again going down to what we destroyed within that those trade school actually system where we bring in these academic concepts. That was very, very good. As my closing remarks, I think this is a good topic, and going forward, we'll of course, with Christian availability, hopefully, we'll start unpacking these things into kind of their main clear components. One of my takeaway from this discussion, the major thing, political will, leadership. Other than that is knowing what you want to do. And I like the way you've explained it. If our politicians know the end point, let the experts define the journey to that end point. The reason why I'm saying this, we seem to have this problem where we think politicians are the people that know how to solve the problem. No. Because, as I said last time, in Africa, politics as a profession, if you want to call it that, as the lowest minimum level, barrier to entry into that space is very, very low. Yet, that's the cadre that actually needs to look after the majority of the population. Can you imagine that? If a doctor looking after a patient didn't do 7 years, nobody would touch that doctor. But yet, we are happy with politicians. Our constitution says, you want to be an MP, get a grade 12, you go there. Some of the grade 12 are even dodgy. But yet, those are the people that we think they can solve the problem. So I think there is that mindset shift. So that's my talk. Value addition, commercialization was a good thing. And the concept of graduation, every program that usually, because programs are like projects, they've got a start time, they've got an end time. Unfortunately, in our country, program seems to go on in perpetuity and there's no learning. This is the same with FISIP. FRA, it just evolved into something else that we don't even know what it is from the conception. So that's a good point. Just to close in, I know hopefully, Christian, you're going to talk about what are the, action to call to action from this discussion that we have, because we need to know what are those takeaways that you think they are really, really cardinal. Thank you.
Christian, we'll give you time to do your closing remarks. Um, uh, I'm not gonna give closing remarks. You guys have said much, but one thing, Christian, you've mentioned is taking an integrated approach, and also Mr. Bimbe, you mentioned about learning, having learning from the past. And Christian, you mentioned about agriculture doing very well at one point. We had very good extensive officers, and then something just went bad. And you mentioned about political will, and there's some countries, even presidents, that are at the political will, and things changed. One example of a president we had was Mwanawasa. Mwanawasa believed in consulting the experts. I remember Mwanawasa bringing Martin Kalungubanda, who is a very good friend of mine. We worked together at BP in Cape Town, and he's been on this program talking about the need for capacity building for policymakers. He took Martin Kalungubanda from Oxfam to come and train some of the government leaders, just like Mr. Bimbo was saying. Some government leaders think they know it all, but Mwanawasa never believed like that. And as a result of Martin working at State House, this job of the spokesperson to the president, which Anthony Bwalia had, was created as a result of Martin working at State House. And he never shy away from bringing experts. Like you said, politicians can come up with something like, this is what we need to do. And then experts will come and put a roadmap how we can get to that point. You remember shortage of maize during Manawasa? They brought some experts with Mundia Skatana as the Minister of Agriculture that time. You remember, Christian? You remember Mr. Bimbe Mukelebai? And they came up with winter maize, which we'd never had in Zambia. So it took some experts to come up with that, and that is political will. And then when you look at some of the countries that are doing very well now, look at Rwanda. Kagame has taken advantage of experts all over the world. Mr. Bimbe has been to Rwanda. Martin Kalungubanda was asked to go and support Kagame. So Kagame has pulled so people think development of such nature just comes like an accident. Like Christian, you talked about the UK. They've planned 50 years. So whatever they are doing, some of these governments, they know that we cannot give money to an organization like ECEC to empower the people. No, they know that banks are there. They've got all the skills. We're going to guarantee. And not only that, governments are smart. That 365 million kwacha, it will be gaining interest in the bank. Well, they've guaranteed, because they know that if banks lend money to the people, they won't make any nonsense. They will get that money back, and people will know that they have to pay back that money than people getting the money from the government. So it takes political will. You said it, Martin, but then it doesn't take the government alone to develop the country. There are experts like you, Christian. Bring those experts together. Let's have an indaba, an agricultural indaba. Where did we go wrong? We were doing well at one point. How can we improve? How can we? Because the government needs to have a picture. Vision. They call it a vision or strategy. Strategy is about actualizing a picture before the picture arrives itself. So strategy is like, this is where we want Zambia to be in terms of agriculture. Then how do we get there? That's when now you people, Christian, Mr. Bimbe, Mukelebai, let's come together. This is what we want to do as a government, but alone we cannot do everything. Alone we don't have the skills. Let's have a triple P engagement here, public partnership engagement, and solve this problem. I think that's what I can take out of that. Thank you so much for that. Mukelebai, before Christian comes in, your closing remarks.
Thank you so much. Anyway, a lot has been said already. The only thing I can say is that we are not that bad, gentlemen. I know we need a lot of improvement. We evolve as time goes. We don't want to be stagnant. We want to move with the global world, and we need to adopt certain mechanisms that will be that are workable for us, for our people. We have already the systems in place. The best thing we can do is to encourage, like we are saying right now, the government to engage the private sectors, like you have said, the banks, involve them to spread this development or the ideas, unlike where you give an individual or a ministry that has people with no experience to distribute money to us. That's why you find there's a lot of rooms or pockets of corruption. When there's starvation, there's hunger in a country, people will be tempted to dip their hands into the pet cash or anything that comes and come and give an excuse. They would rather give an excuse. So it is imperative that our government, like we are already crying, that they have political will in disseminating information and empowering the ministries that are already, or the institutions, especially institutions that we already have, that are in existence. And if those institutions are a liability to our people, please, we have the legislatures that can simply repeal or rather remove those institutions and create new ones that that can work for the benefit of our people. The youths are the future of tomorrow, the new generation. If we neglect them today as elderly society, senior citizens, or government, if we neglect our youths, then we are not going to have the better future tomorrow. Our grandchildren, great grandchildren will actually point a finger at us and say, you the people that caused all these sufferings and tribulations that we are going through, because we were selfish and we just chose to eat direct, hand to mouth, and we forgot to save and for the future. So it is imperative that we as a country work together as a team. Yes, professionalism is important. Let's engage those with the knowledge, those that went to school and have the know-how, the capacity, the knowledge to help us bring Zambia back on the map. But we are very, very positive that the current government is actually in the line of bringing that hope we've been praying for. Hopefully, they do not divert along the way, because if they do, we'll be on their necks. Thank you so much.
Mukeleva, thank you so much for that closing remark. Dr. Christian, please give us your closing remarks, and also that should include some of the action points from this discussion. And also, if you can answer this question, we've talked about political will. You know, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Do you think our current government, the New Dawn government, has a political will to change our economy and move into agriculture and establish successful enterprises across this agricultural chains, value chain, or diversifying into from mining to agriculture? Is there a political will? Over to you, Christian.
Thank you. Maybe let me start by saying that some of the important action points have been highlighted here, so that at the end of this discussion, there are some things that can be actioned. I have said that there are some hardware and software issues, okay? The ones that need to be paid the most attention to are the software issues. Society has degenerated to a level where some things have become harder to do. Okay, we are sliding downwards. We are not yet at the worst point, and the crisis is declared because of the direction we are going and how fast we are moving there, not because we have hit bottom. So let's not wait for that. So the software issues have to do with mindsets, changing mindsets, people's mindsets around jobs, issues of commercialization, issues of corruption, and because people are succeeding in corruption. So how do you encourage someone to take risk, invest their money, working hard, when others are profiting from corruption, and it's the easier route? It demotivates the hard workers, okay? So these are issues that have to be addressed, and this is where political will comes into, to encourage commercialization, we said, to address issues of politically exposed individuals, because people see them. You know, you can't fool people. They see them, whether it is in the previous government or the one before that or this current one, people see them, okay? So politically exposed people are distorting markets and affecting, providing disincentives for people to work hard, okay? It promotes industrialization. We have enough technology that can allow small-scale industrial activities to happen in different parts of the country, okay? So those are very basic things that Kaunda attempted to do and produced a measurable amount of results. So it's not difficult. It doesn't take many years to create that. Because of the nature of our society, we change very quickly. So if you ask me, in about 2 years, you can transform this country in about 2 years. But political will is important because decisions have to be made to say, we are stopping this and we are starting that. We are now going to do this way, not the other, and insisting on that, even with resistance and quite often from the technocrats, okay, who have become comfortable with a system that works for them. Okay, so now, if you come to the current government, I think the current government has had good intentions overall. That we must give them, okay? But you see, the bar was very low because the previous government had lowered the bar to a point where it was easy to switch. You know, people wanted change, okay? and they found what they thought was the next best option, and they changed. Okay, and the messaging was positive to address.
I think we're having some technical issues from our guest. Must be some internet problems or power outage. I think we
Hello,
were.
sorry, I lost you there. Can you hear
Yes,
me?
Christian. Okay, we can hear you now.
Okay, just
Continue,
conclude.
Christian.
Thank you very much. So the intentions were good, okay, overall, okay, and they came in to address what had become clearly a difficult situation, which was not so good, okay. So that's the opportunity they had to get quick wins when they come in. You know, when the standard is very low, it's easy for you to show positive results by picking what we call low-lying fruit. I don't think they have been very coordinated in how they have gone about it, and they're losing time. Because you see, politics are about working within a certain time frame, and most politicians and political parties want to retain power. There are some very difficult decisions that have to be made early in a political term, so that by the middle to second half of the term, you are showing results and people appreciate, and therefore you can retain power. We are past 1.5 years, and it appears that maybe the challenge may not have been very well understood. Okay, so there's quite some disconnects. Okay, and you have a president that's now moving around trying to solve all sorts of problems, and you have leaders, political leaders at ministerial level who are invisible, and yet they are supposed to be championing the message that has been agreed, the change that has been agreed. You know, we should not see a president going around and trying to address national problems. You know, he should work together with his lieutenants to make sure that the president is visible through those people. Ministers should be making very difficult pronouncements. We've seen this before in Zambia, where ministers have stood up and have said, we have to do this way. One minister was asked, but the president said the other thing. Okay, and he says, no, this is the way to go, and if the president insists, I'll resign. We've had a minister saying that, and that was the best performing finance minister in Africa for, I think, a few years. Okay, I think you may remember him. I was around, I saw that. The man stood his ground because he had a basis upon which he insisted on what he was insisting. Okay, and he argued his case, and he had a voice. And because of that, he was given the space to produce results. And he did produce results. But if you have lieutenants that are trying to be so careful that in the end they are ineffective, then we are losing time, their lives affected by that time, and there's a political term that is running out. Very soon they'll start throwing out short-term benefits so that they can win the next election, and we would have lost the opportunity of the term. So change must happen now. Difficult decisions that may even be unpopular must happen now, because in 2 years they'll begin to show results and people appreciate, and because of that they'll still elect them. Unless that happens, we will not see change. We're going to lose a whole 5 years effectively. That's my comment on that one.
That was fantastic. I can see Mr. Bimbe is shaking his head. Anything you want to say, Mr. Bimbe? I can see you shaking your head. I can give you 1 minute.
I can't say it better. He's just laid it out for me. That's
actually, I just love the conclusion part, the last part on the government, the ministers, these lieutenants you've mentioned. You just nailed it. I hope they're listening. You just told them, you've just woken them up. And I'm happy that you used that word, because that's what we've been trying to say, but you just put it in the right way, the way we've been dreaming, but we never thought it would come out like that.
It's something that we've always discussed on this.
Christian Christian,
Yes,
that
was
was
amazing.
powerful.
summarized it nicely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank God we've brought you in, and our viewers. Some viewers have asked, we need Christian regularly, and you're gonna have Christians and many other experts through Christian, so you don't have to worry about that. And then, Christian, you've mentioned something very important about the current government, and it's something we've talked about on this program. This television station, online television station, Bakwetu, supported this government. Most of the people from the diaspora, and we're still supporting this government. To have these programs or shows is an is we're trying to support this government in any way we can, so that this government meets the aspirations of the people. They meet the manifesto. They meet what they promised to do to the people. And if this government succeeds, we all succeed. And we don't want this
Exactly.
government to fail, because the enemy we've left behind was worse than what is happening now. So we cannot go backwards. So we should pray and help this government to succeed, so that Zambia moves forward. Thank you so much, Christian, for coming, and expect you to come for more shows. Mr. Bimbe, thank you so much for being my co-host. Mom Kerevai, always coming to support us. Thank you so much. And more importantly, our viewers. I can see our viewers from all over the world, from Botswana, from America, from Canada, from Zambia, from some are from Mazabuka, Chingola, all over Zambia. Thank you so much for your viewership. And please, every Monday at 9 o'clock Zambian time, 7 o'clock GMT, please come and listen to our programs. Please join us whenever you have time. We post our link on Facebook, on YouTube. Please come and join us. Come and ask questions. Let's build our country together. Together, Zambia shall be prosperous. Thank you so much once again, and may the good Lord bless our mother Zambia. Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Thank you very much.